Hello everyone, this is update for May 24, 2024, day 821 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for May 23 and 22. Before I jump into actual essence of the video, I want to say thank you to all of the viewers who provided feedback. I really appreciate it. And the key takeaway is that overwhelming majority of the viewers would like me to resume looking sort of global picture, and economy is the most important part in my view, because that's without economy you cannot have a war, basically, because it provides everything you need for the war. So this is essential part, and essentially wars are being waged because of the economy. So it all boils down in the end to the economy. So I'll start resuming those reviews in the coming videos. I'm not promising exactly the next video I'm gonna start, but definitely the following video, I should be able to resume and hopefully provide some interesting insights. So now let's switch to actual topics for this past couple days. I'm going to start with strategic general updates, and then I'm going to switch to the battlefield in Ukraine after that. The first news is that Reuters was reporting that Russia is ready for peace negotiations. It doesn't seem that that's actually true, because the spokesperson for Russian president spoke and as you can imagine, and stated that Russia is not ready for negotiations. Also, Russian president visited Belarus, which BY here you see that's a neighboring country north of Ukraine, which, as I stated many times, is extension of Russia. And so he stated that that Ukrainian president is not legitimate anymore, so therefore he cannot sign legally any deal, peace deals or anything. So effectively, he's kind of playing this legal game to deny effectively Ukraine's sovereignty. And I'm not saying that Ukrainian president is great, as everybody is fully aware. I'm absolutely critical of Ukrainian president. I think he's the worst that can happen to Ukraine, and he's totally leading Ukraine towards disaster. Um, Nevertheless, it's very clear, in my view, that Russia is not willing to go into negotiations, because it feels that there is much more to gain, that Ukraine is about to crumble within, let's say, next 6 months, let's put this way. And that really sort of makes Russia's president and general political circles more emboldened in their moves, decisions, and so on. We'll see where it all goes, but as I stated that before, Ukrainian president does everything to make it worse for Ukraine, to be able to defend itself. So, for example, there are the attorney general of this legal system basically opened up like 20 plus criminal cases against the commanders of the units that were supposed to defend Kharkiv from on the eastern side, where there was Russian invasion. So as you can see, there is, instead of trying to understand the problem, solve it, and actually looking in the mirror and realizing that he is a part of the problem, he decides to sort of shift the blame to others and criminalize them and so on. So it's absolutely destructive approach, strategy that will backfire phenomenally in a short period of time. It's not going to be years. It's exactly as I stated. Probably in 6 months, things gonna get pretty ugly. Going back to sort of ugliness in Ukraine, the mobilization I mentioned before about the mobilization, and that there is tons of corruption where this gambling company was protected from mobilization. At the same time, the companies that actually produce value add in Ukraine, they are drained of people to work. So, for example, I think there's one of the best steelmakers in the world, actually located here in Kryvyi Rih, and they think lost out of 18,000 people that work there, workers. They like 3,000 were drafted, I believe, plus minus. But as you can imagine, it's pretty significant blow to the company, to the point that they attempting to recruit women to those jobs, which is obviously not the best job on this planet, and especially for your health and so on. So probably um, you know not ideal, but a similar situation happening everywhere throughout Ukrainian economy, which essentially this indiscriminate and mindless mobilization destroys businesses, destroys companies, and actually protects this corrupt and connected businesses, which for the most part are extremely parasitic and produce no value add. So this will even put Ukrainian economy, whatever is left of it, which is not much at all, into even worse situation where it will eventually start to disintegrate, because you simply cannot run business. If you manage to survive to this point, you probably will be done in a pretty short order. To top it up, the geniuses from circles of Ukrainian president, I showed that person. His last name is Hitmantsev. Now proposing to actually increase taxes, to increase government revenues. That's just uh, gives you a example of how disconnected and what like absolutely low level of intelligence that person has. And obviously Ukrainian president in the same boat, because he picks people of the same kind that surround him. So he's proposing to, for example, increase VAT to like 22%. And right now it's 20% in Ukraine. It's already on the higher end generally. And that tax is going to be very repressive, and this is like one of the worst taxes out there that exist, generally distorting economic life and everything, and source of extreme corruption in the government itself. It generates, I would say, if I would single out the most corrupt sort of topic in the government, thing that generates corruption in Ukraine is actually VAT, and specifically VAT refunds, because government officials figure out how not to refund VAT that's supposed to be refunded automatically, and then they get kickbacks from the businesses, so the businesses can get back at least some of those refunds that are due to them. So, and increasing this pressure basically gives even more power into this corrupt government officials, which will, completely destroy the Ukrainian economy even further. So, um, and in addition to that, Ukraine now facing chronic power shortages, to the point that there are blackouts. Sometimes they are controllable, sometimes they are not controllable. So far, looks like when the sort of saving grace is the warm weather. If weather gonna get just cooler, and like not even like winter, but simply cooler, it looks like Ukraine will have um, at the shortages will be the blackouts will be totally uncontrollable, because right now different estimates put different numbers, but Ukraine has roughly between 10 to 25% of its needs, even with import of electricity from like Poland, Romania, and Hungary, it's the throughput is not enough to provide. There's not enough electricity to sustain Ukraine because the damage is vast and extremely big, and so simply it's like another Poland needs to generate. So you will have, in terms of power generation, you need essentially another Poland, and obviously Poland doesn't have enough, like doesn't have uh, that much extra electricity, and the same is true for Romania. Because in the past, typically, actually, Ukraine would provide electricity to those countries, so they would actually be donors, not Ukraine. So they are sort of they themselves normally lack electricity, lack a generation capacities for electricity. So things looking pretty ugly from that perspective. I'm gonna discuss one topic that's gonna be relevant, and so specifically, I'm gonna talk a little bit about F-16s because they are coming. Some people saying they're already there, but in any case, they're definitely coming. And I just want to make a quick comparison and kind of explain why this F-16s basically false hope is propaganda, similar to what Leopards were, similar to what Abrams and whatever else was sort of mentioned before. That sort of magic weapon, Wunderwaffe, that will change situation magically in Ukrainian favor. So that's not gonna happen. There is no question that they're gonna be helpful. Uh, Anything helps, as they say, right? But the thinking that arrival of F-16 on the battlefield is gonna change things is absolutely false. And this it's like a boomerang. It will make things worse psychologically, because there is this unsupported hope that's being built in people, and then it's going to get completely destroyed and deflated, and that obviously will lead to complete apathy, and that's just where it's going to go. But let me just kind of explain why I'm saying what I'm saying, so you understand a little bit better. And for that, we're going to look at technical capabilities of these airplanes. So first, we're looking at F-16, then F-15, and then also, well, they all old, by the way. All airplanes are old. And then we're gonna look at Soviet Su-27 and MiG-29. So this is, you see, like kind of all like basically they are sort of semi-disassembled, especially Su-27. So what I want to say is all of these airplanes, they are product of the 70s. The US developed them a little bit sort of ahead of the Soviet Union, and then Su-27 was answer to F-15 from Soviet Union, which was delayed roughly like 10 years or so. Was in development that long, and then US developed F-16, and then the answer was from Soviet Union. It was MiG-29. So they are sort of basically it's a Soviet answer to these two airplanes. In these two airplanes, if we look, one is more expensive, more capable version of the fighter airplane than the other one, and that's specifically F-15 in this case, and Su-27. So the correct pairs are Su-27, F-15, and then the cheaper, more simpler, less capable version is of the fighter airplane, and more also was kind of like a tactical bomber as well. So this is kind of like dual role there. That's F-16, and the Soviet equivalent would be MiG-29. And then I want to kind of a little bit explain bigger picture. So this F-15 then was developed into F-22, which I think I made video probably more than a year ago when I was comparing with the Chinese situation. And so going back to that, so F-22 is further development of F-15, and then F-35 is basically the next generation of F-16. As for those who haven't seen that video, is what I was saying is that even US could not support and make F-22 work. Most of them have they plugged with technical problems. Maintenance is super expensive, and I mentioned before that roughly only 20, I want to say 29% of them are battle ready. So the rest of them are in repairs and so on. And I even speculated that if there is actual action, that probably even out of that 29% that would be still optimistic, it probably will drop to like 20% realistically what's available. So then US actually stopped producing F-22. They're super expensive. Even US cannot afford them, cannot maintain them. So it's almost like, in some ways, it's like say human race is degrading. They cannot even continue supporting complex equipment. So the fallback was this F-35, which is cheaper version and lot less capable version of the relative to F-22. And as I stated, it was development of the same idea continues. What F-16 was much cheaper, less capable version of F-15. And as we all know, F-35 is also super expensive. Also plagued with technical issues, and it seems like it's also last ditch effort to keep that product alive, and it's possible that it may die too, the same as F-22 did. So actually going back to this, so to really to describe how terrible picture is that so US could not continue producing F-22. So what happened is they reverted to resuming production of F-15. So basically, you go back to the 70s because you're not capable to produce the latest aircraft, and that's a sort of sorry state of affairs. And as I mentioned before, that's the reason for that is total monopolization of the arms manufacturing in the West, and specifically US, and also I would say monopolization of the labor, which it's kind of like a double whammy. Basically, you have monopolization of sort of capital organization, and then you have monopolization of labor. So then your product is insanely expensive, which is exactly what's happened with F-22, F-35, and then therefore economy cannot support those extremely expensive products, and so you fall back to cheaper one. So that's a summary of like big picture, what's going on with all of these airplanes. Well, and then as I mentioned, Russia is developing their own, but it doesn't have right engines, so it's kind of like they have their aircraft, but they don't really have engines, and so they also really don't have a product. Let's put it this way. The only one, actually, ironically, the only one who has actual product is China, which I mentioned that they also had problems with engines. They apparently resolved those problems, and now they are producing basically their equivalent of F-22, which will help them if there is war to gain air superiority over the US. So that's again. Going back to all of this, I said for a reason that it's a sorry state of affairs, what's going on in the West, generally speaking. But now let's go back to more specific situation and why I state that F-16 is not going to be magic weapon that will change situation suddenly and things will change. So let's have a look at F-16. So as you can see, the top speed is 2,200 kilometers per hour. So if you compare, let's say, Soviet equivalent, which would be MiG-29, that one has 2,500 kilometers per hour. So you can see it's faster, and that's really important in a jet fighter. It's almost one of the most critical parts, characteristics of the airplane. Um, so if we can compare them, the airplane generally, Soviet airplanes generally heavier equivalent. So as you can see, weight is, let's say, gross one is 12 metric tons for the F-16. The Soviet one is like 15 metric tons. This is really, and it's true the same for Su-27 versus F-15. So that's a reflection of, I would say, poor Soviet engineering. And so generally, U.S. airplanes, they are lighter, they smaller, more compact, and from that perspective, it's obviously better and also a reflection of better engineering capabilities, at least at that time in the 70s, right? Because as I mentioned before, there is very clear degradation happening in the West, specifically in manufacturing capacity capabilities. That obviously happened with the former Soviet Union, and Russia is one of the main components of the Soviet Union. So the same, both blocks went the same path. The only one who actually went in completely opposite direction is China, as I said before. So what this drives is that Soviet airplanes, they need more powerful engines. So if we compare the engine on F-16, it has a thrust of 79 kilonewtons and with afterburner 131. So basically, just like you cannot have it for long, but it's like a boost in a way. Let's think about this in a simple way. And so as you can see, MiG-29 has 99 and 163. The plus of MiG-29 also is that it's actually twin engine, versus F-16 is a single engine. In this case, it's generally better to have two engines. The ceiling also for like basically how high the airplane can fly is, for MiG-29 it's 18 kilometers, for F-16 is 15 kilometers. So again, it's, as you can see, it's worse. So from most, generally speaking, F-16 is certainly not better than MiG-29, and so that's why I'm saying is that there won't be much of anything. Let's put this. It's going to be, as I say, much ado but nothing. We can also look at another important characteristic is power to weight ratio, and power to weight ratio was afterburner. So you can see here that F-16 is slightly better, very little, but better because of the lower weight of the airplanes. And so it implies a little bit better in maneuverability, but it's extremely marginal. It's not gonna it's not gonna get you much. And given the speed and ceiling are better for MiG-29, generally airplane I would argue that MiG-29 is a better airplane. Now, where there is a problem generally for the Soviet airplane is avionics, which was terrible there, and that's where there's advantage for F-16. So, so it kind of like in some ways evens out, but in any, and plus then we need to compare the missiles, which is totally another part of the sort of another piece of the story that's a separate, because I'm just looking purely at the airplane without considering missiles that they can carry. So, but purely if we just compare airplanes, F-16 is not going to be, as you can see, technically it's not any better. Then if we compare Su-27, Su-27 is essentially has the same characteristic actually as MiG-29. So the top speed is 2500 and the ceiling is 18 kilometers. It obviously has more powerful engines because it's actually much heavier and so on. So again, Su-27 also has advantage over F-16, where it's actually the Su-27 would be in disadvantage would be against F-15, because actually F-15 is better. As you can see, speed is 2600 and the ceiling is 20 kilometers, right? And if you look at this power ratios, I would say, more or less even, where you can see that Su-27 a little bit better with afterburner, but F-15 a little bit better with just plain without afterburner. So again, Ukraine is not getting F-15. First of all, they are expensive. You can even see how many manufacturers were of those. This F-15 only 500 versus 4.6 thousand for F-16. Even the manufacturing number kind of tells you difficulty in manufacturing and expense and so on. So F-16 is just call it like mass market type of thing. Dirty cheap, and the same MiG-29. This is the same idea, except you can see that Soviet aircraft manufacturing industry wasn't as capable as the US. So you can see 3 times fewer airplanes that were built. But generally speaking, I hope it makes sense and very sorry. So direction of the situation is very clear. So F-16 is definitely no better relative to Su-27 and MiG-29. Will be much more expensive to maintain relative to those two. Plus, obviously, Russia has improved version of Su-27, which is called Su-35. So so as you can see, it's not, again, going back to the main message. It's not gonna change much. It's definitely gonna be helpful for Ukraine, but it's totally not what is being presented. Definitely not this propaganda message. I would say F-15 would be definitely, I would say, helpful, but again, as you can see, US doesn't have many of those, um, and out of this 500 that were manufactured, actually, in sort of the battle ready, only like less than half of those. So as you can see, there's at most 250 aircraft. So situation is again is not going to be so rosy as it's presented. Now I'm gonna switch to the situation on battlefield and discuss one thing that I think it's somewhat hypothetical, but I think this is what's really happening. And I mentioned before that Ukrainian troops retreated from the bridgehead near Krynky. So that bridgehead, but it's basically gone, and but it's not. I don't have 100% confirmation, but it appears so. And what really happened? It looks like that Ukrainian command did not have enough resources to stop Russian offensive. Well, I wouldn't even call it offensive. Russian attack east of Kharkiv, so they had to pull resources from this area, specifically this naval infantry brigades and and they actually threw, I think, 36 or 37 naval infantry brigade to Kharkiv area, or I would say remnants of it, because it's obviously not full strength. After fighting near in Krynky area, they definitely uh, probably like 50% of their strengths essentially. And I don't know if there are others, so the rest of them were thrown to Kharkiv. I'm unclear, but basically, this Russian attack east of Kharkiv forced Ukrainian command out of desperation to actually abandon a bridgehead in Krynky and through the whatever they can scramble to Kharkiv area to stop that attack and stop Russian advance. Kind of gives you how bad things are on Ukrainian side. And then there are reports right now that basically Ukrainian authorities are dumping water from the upstream this reservoirs to basically flood this area to increase the amount of water here to prevent Russian troops from establishing their bridgeheads on the western bank of Dnipro River. So as you can see, what this means really is that Ukrainian command does not feel like it has enough resources to fend off potential Russian landing operation on the west bank of Dnipro River. So things completely in disarray, even from this. As I stated, this is, I would say, hypothetical, but extremely likely that this is what's really happening. There are also reports that Russian command is amassing troops east of Sumy. Again, it's not huge, but it's like, let's say, 10-15,000 troops. And that really works for Russian command, for actually Russian political top, because it allows them to really expose problem or incompetence of Ukrainian political top and Ukrainian military top, which creates extremely explosive situation inside of Ukraine. So it's I would say it's not directly instigating, but in some ways it's instigating that 1917 moment that I was mentioning before, and where Ukraine is definitely on say on a track to get there the way things are going right now. And so in some ways this attacks, the Russian side does not have enough resources for full blown like offensives, but they use these attacks to basically poke holes, uh, you know, destroy Ukrainian defenses, show incompetence of Ukrainian military command and incompetence of Ukrainian president and his circles, which is totally political victory, but it works for Russian president and his circle extremely well. That's all they need. It's in some ways it's like a KGB operation done through military forces. In some ways, it's very interesting hybrid sort of approach of using both KGB together with the military, which is totally unusual situation. Usually they work separately, and they typically don't cross their passes. So that's a situation right now. Now I'm gonna actually walk through specific sections of the front line. So as I mentioned, there are reports that Russian command is amassing another group, let's say, army group, I guess you can call it that way, probably 10-15,000 to basically do the same what they did east of Kharkiv, create crisis, and who knows, maybe Ukrainian command will not have enough resources to uh, to put down this fire because it was so difficult to put down fire east of Kharkiv. Now let's actually move to that area and see what's going on. So far, like the front line essentially hasn't changed. Russian troops are firmly bogged down. They're not really advancing. They attacking Lipsy because that's the most important stronghold on the path to Kharkiv. Uh, so far, Ukrainian defenses sort of stand successful and so on. And then the other area of attack is this Vovchansk area, where basically the situation become stalemate. Russian command is clearly seeing they cannot advance with the resources they have. So effectively, as I stated, it's sort of a draw basically. Uh, the Ukrainian side lost this core of the town effectively. There are some attempts to regain it, but most likely it will sort of the status quo will remain, and the front line basically like kind of freeze along this Volcha River, and then where I'm showing, including this Buhrovatka and Staritsa and so on. So basically, where shown here, so effectively that's what the uh, Russian side was able to capture effectively so far. Now let's move to the situation on the North Lugansk section of the front line. So here things more or less the same. Russian troops attacking from southeast towards Kupiansk. The same is happening from northeast. They have some, they gaining ground slowly but surely. So they are advancing. Then they continuing attacks here in this large forest. Here that's without success actually here in this area. Now let's move to the North Donbass section of the front line. Things here also more or less the same. Frontal pressure towards Siversk without much success by Russian troops. Now let's look what's going on in the Chasiv Yar area. Here also strong Russian attacks, but without success so far. As I stated before, it's not going to be easy for the Russian side, and in some ways it's probably going to bog down. They clearly need much more resources here to be successful, which I don't believe they have. There are some advances in the Klishivka area and Andriivka here, the two villages. They captured majority of those villages. There are obviously advances, and there's no question that Ukrainian troops are not what they used to be even in 2023. Now let's move to the central Donbass section of the front line. Things here more or less stable, more or less the same that I showed on the 18th. The only place where Russian troops are advancing is this along this railroad towards Progress. There's not huge amount of advance, but they're obviously putting pressure in the hope to to have a bridge here somehow, but it's basically um, I would say the best way to describe is that Ukrainian troops are extremely slowly retreating. That's the best way to describe the situation. But so far, no major villages were captured in this area by Russian troops. If we look south in Krasnohorivka area, Russian troops continued their advance in Krasnohorivka, so it appears that they are close to be capturing it. So probably another week, and they're gonna capture it or something like that. And then there will be, I would say, probably easier advance towards west, because obviously urban area is easier to defend than open field. So that's just the reality of it. There's strong Russian pressure also West of Marinka, they slowly advancing there. There is not really hugely much to show there yet. Eventually, once there is significant gains, I'll show those. And there's obviously pressure west of Novomikhailivka, but without, again, I'd say gains that are big enough that are worth showing. Let's put it this way. Now let's move to the situation on the Zaporizhya front line. So here the pressure is extremely low. It's in the same area in Urozhaine and Rabotine, but as I stated, it's say very low. Now let's move to the situation along the Dnipro River. So I did not change yet because I don't have 100% confirmation. But based on all of this information, is that these bridgeheads were evacuated. The maybe the only one where there's still some presence of Ukrainian troops is this Antonievsky bridge, but I don't have clear confirmation. And what I mentioned is that Ukrainian authorities are dumping water from this reservoir that's upstream, basically into this reservoir, which right now it's actually not correctly. The picture is obviously not correct because the dam was destroyed here in Novokakhovka area, but effectively they're trying to flood this area downstream here to prevent Russian troops from doing their own landing operations on the western bank of Dnipro River. So again, the reason for that, as I mentioned, is that some of these naval infantry brigades, or one or two, were pulled out, and there's obviously not enough resources left to defend against pretty significant number of Russian troops that can potentially create their own bridgehead. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.